Hello everyone, it's Shannon here for Pinkfresh Studio. In today's video, we are going to create this beautiful foiled card featuring the Delicate Foliage hot foil plate. We're going to repeat this image to create our background that has a lot of texture and detail. We're going to start with the Delicate Foliage hot foil plate. I'm going to put it here on my warmed up glimmer machine. You can see that it's all ready to go, ready for that plate. I'm going to use the grid lines on the platform here to kind of help me know where to place my cardstock after it's ready to go. I hit the timer stopped blinking now, so it's now ready to create our sandwich. Once I detached my platform here, that plate kind of jostled, so I just lined it back up with those two lines. And then I'm going to grab my glimmer foil. I'm using Aura today, and then I'll place down my cardstock, and then I will grab my two plates and place them one on top of the other over that sandwich. I went ahead and ran that through my Spellbinders Platinum, and here's my finished foiled foliage. Love the way that looks. I repeated that process 2 more times, so now I have 3 of those Delicate Foliage hot foiled images. I'm going to go ahead and die cut them first. We're going to die cut them with the coordinating die before we actually do any of our ink blending with the stencil. So here are all 3 of those Delicate Foliage die cuts ready to go. Now I'm moving on to the stencil set. There are 2 stencils in this set, so pretty simple. I'm going to start with stencil 1 here with one of my die cuts. I'm going to line up this stencil here, and then once I get in place, I'll grab a couple pieces of tape just to kind of hold it down while I do my ink blending. I have 2 inks picked out for this first stencil. I'm going to start with Key Lime and just ink blend all the openings with this light kind of green. Then once we finish with this lighter green, we're going to move on to a darker shade, which is Olive, to create an ombre. So I'm almost done here with Key Lime, and we'll switch to our next shade. I'm not going to move the stencil or anything. I'm just going to leave it in place. So we're just about done with that Key Lime. Now we're moving on to Olive. I'm going to use one of the blending brushes by Pinkfresh and just add my little ombre, a little touch of this olive to kind of the base of the leaves. Now they are small, so I'm getting sometimes a whole entire leaf, but that's okay. I want just a variation in color. I don't want it to just be that Key Lime. I definitely want to get some of that olive on there so we have some subtle ombres going on, or subtle gradations over the leaves. Now we're going to move on to stencil number 2, so the same die cut, but now we're on the second stencil, and this one is very simple. I'm just going to simply ink blend with our olive, which was our darker green in the last combo. Just ink blend with this darker green over all the openings in that stencil, and that will complete our first Delicate Foliage die cut. Now we're moving on to our second die cut, starting again with stencil number 1 from the Delicate Foliage stencil set, and I'm going to start with ink blending all the openings with Meadow. So basically we're going to do 2 inks, a lighter and a darker, for each die cut, and the first stencil will be a combo of the light and dark, and the last stencil will be just the darker ink. And we're going to now move on. We finished with that Meadow. We're now moving on to our darker ink, which is Evergreen, and just going to ink blend some of those little gradations just like we did with that last die cut. And this is going to add a lot more interest and create these beautiful kind of tonal changes over the leaves, and it just adds a lot. So now that we're finished with that first stencil for our second die cut, we're moving on to stencil number 2 here. Here we're going to ink blend all the openings with that darker ink, which again was Evergreen. And this one's very, very simple, and it goes really quickly. These are just going to be kind of like our shadow leaves, and they just add a lot of contrast and really adds more interest to this die cut. So here's our second die cut finished. Now we have 1 more to go here. This is more of a teal tone or teal combo. We're starting with Aquamarine as our light, going to ink blend all the openings on stencil 1 here with this lighter teal. And once we finish with Aquamarine, we'll move on to our darker shade, which is Tidal Pond. So just finishing up the Aquamarine, now we're on to Tidal Pond. Again, ink blending those gradations, just getting a little bit of that Tidal Pond, that darker ink on these leaves. making sure not to lose all of our lighter ink color. Once I finish with that, we'll move on to, we'll actually remove the stencil, and then we'll move on to stencil number 2, our last stencil for this die cut. Just holding it to the camera real quick so you can see those gradations. So I've got stencil 2 already lined up here, and we're going to simply ink blend all the openings with that Tidal Pond. And once we finish with that, we are done ink blending all of our Delicate Foliage die cuts. So there's the teal one, kind of the limey green one, and the more kind of natural Kelly green. Now I wanted to kind of color in, some of these leaves are intentionally left white, and I just wanted to add a little bit of color to them because I felt like this card was just going to end up being too much white. So I'm taking a Copic marker in a similar tone to the greens that I used to ink blend the leaves to color in all those remaining white leaves. And this is very subtle because the marker I picked, or the color I picked for all of these combos, is a very light shade kind of the inks that I use, so it's very subtle, but it just will kind of push back that white a little bit and make this feel a little less like there's a lot of white on this card. So now that I finished coloring those, we're going to move on to the frames and the sentiments. I have the Nested Rectangles foil plate for our frames, and then the Wonderful Sentiments foil plates for our sentiment. So I've already got them ready to go here on my Glimmer machine. I'm going to go ahead and detach the machine. That jostled the plates, so I did quickly adjust them. Now be careful if you're going to do this. Those plates are hot. I'm just using my nail there so I don't have to actually touch them with my finger. Then I'll place down my Aura foil, then my cardstock, then my shim and my top plate, and then I'll run this through my Spellbinders Platinum. Here we are with our finished foiled frames and sentiment. They look so good. I actually did one extra frame here just because I didn't want to waste the foil, but I will only use the largest and smaller frame that I foiled that you saw there. So now we're going to create a real quick background. I have my A2 top folding white card base, and I'm going to quickly ink blend with our green inks that we used for the foliage, starting with Meadow and Evergreen for kind of the lower right corner, and then at the top we're going to ink blend with Aquamarine, and then we'll move on to our darker shade. We're going to kind of keep the center light, so we're doing a gradation where it gets lighter in the center but darker on the edges. So I just switched over to Tidal Pond, which is our darker color in that teal combo. Once I finish with that, we'll move on to our last combo, and that starts with our lighter, which is Key Lime, and ink blend that corner. Love that Key Lime. That adds so much energy and freshness to this palette. Then we'll finish with a little bit of olive on that lower right corner just to kind of help us get that a more dramatic gradation. Now I'm just going to fine tune here. I felt like I needed a little bit more of that teal at the top, so I'm going back to the Tidal Pond, and then I'll go back to the Aquamarine and just kind of bring down that teal a little bit more towards the center, and that will actually complete our blended background. Now we're kind of ready to bring this together. I have my die cuts here. I'm going to arrange them over that blended card front. Once I get them in place, I'm going to grab the largest foiled frame and just kind of see where it falls. It goes right up to the edge, so that's where I'm going to add my liquid adhesive. So I'm just going to add a little bit of liquid adhesive, only like 1/4 of an inch into the card, and then hold those die cuts in place, and then place that frame on top. And by placing that frame over the glue, that's going to hold all those die cuts in place the way that I arranged them. The whole normally I would use press and seal, but you can't use press and seal with foiled images because that press and seal will pick up and remove your foil. So, and then you'll have these splotchy areas. So you've got to be careful and not use anything sticky at all, even press and seal with your foiled images. So now that I've got that frame glued down, I went ahead and grabbed my scissors and trimmed off any of the overhang from the Delicate Foliage die cuts. And once we finish with that, we're going to actually add a smaller frame to the inside just to kind of start to draw your eye into the center, which will be where our sentiment is. I'm just going to add liquid glue to this frame all over and then just center it and stick it right down. I am using the grid lines on my work surface to kind of help me get that in as close to center as I can possibly eyeball it. And then we'll be ready to add some foam adhesive to the back side. So by doing these two foiled frames, it really adds a lot of support and makes it really easy for us to add foam adhesive to the back side, because all we're going to add it to is basically those framed areas behind there, and that's really all the support you really need to kind of lift up all those delicate foliage die cuts and create a beautiful shadow because of the dimension. So I just finished removing the backing on the foam adhesive, and now I'm going to stick this down. But I wanted to point out that I'm rotating my panel around, so the teal foliage is now at the bottom of my card, down where the kind of key lime and meadow and evergreen inks were, and that is just going to create more contrast. So I purposely made sure that the matching foliage wasn't where I ink blended those inks. And now I'm ready to move on to my sentiment. I've already added foam adhesive to the back side. Now I'm going to remove the backing of the foam adhesive kind of in the center of the sentiment, and we are going to add a little bit, another strip of foam adhesive there, so it's doubled up there in the center. And that's because I want this sentiment to be lifted up even higher than the frames and the foliage, for just kind of help your eye separate it from that background a little bit more and even create some more beautiful shadows. And here is the finished card. I'll hold it to the camera so you can get a good look at all the details. I love the way it turned out, that beautiful ombre background, and the contrast of our ombre leaves kind of being flip-flopped around is really, really striking. And we just have that subtle foiled frame to kind of bring your eye into our beautiful sentiment. I hope you guys enjoyed today's card and video. If you have any questions about the products I use, please check out the links below in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.